News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Dan Schwartzman. The Reverend Jesse Jackson, one of the most prominent civil rights activists, as well as a two-time presidential candidate and the founder of the Rainbow Push Coalition, has died at the age of 84. Fellow civil rights activist Al Sharpton talked about his friend.
Now, he was a hard taskmaster. He would always get on me about, why are you on this issue? You need to be more studied on this. But he was one who was more responsible than anyone for teaching me activism.
That's civil rights activist Al Sharpton. Jackson had disclosed back in 2017 that he had Parkinson's disease. Iran says it has reached a, quote, general agreement with the U.S. on the basis of a potential nuclear deal that would lift sanctions on Tehran. Iran's foreign minister, though, cautioned that the next stage would be, quote, more difficult and detailed. Axios is reporting that Iran is expected to present the U.S. with detailed proposals in the next 2 weeks to address some gaps in negotiations. Iran, meanwhile, closing the Strait of Hormuz for several hours to conduct military drills. Oil fell in the news of the positive negotiations to under $63 a barrel. A third round of U.S.-led negotiations on ending Russia's war in Ukraine began in Geneva today. There is little optimism that a breakthrough can be reached to stop the more than 4 years of fighting. The talks are expected to address a wide range of issues, including territory, military, political, and economic matters, and will continue for a second day on Wednesday. Bloomberg's Oliver Crook with more.
I think that the sort of expectations are fairly low from, the sort of renewed effort with the trilateral talks that involve the United States, the Ukrainians, and the Russians, where basically this is the third meeting in about 3 weeks. So there certainly has been an increase of the cadence of these sort of negotiations. That being said, again, you listen to Marco Rubio while he's been in Munich, while he's been in Budapest over the last couple of days. He's basically saying some days I feel better about it than others, but at the end of the day, I'm not really in a position to say whether or not we're any closer to a resolution for this war.
That's Bloomberg's Oliver Crook. Democrats have sent a counteroffer to Republicans and the White House on their demands to rein in immigration enforcement with a shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security into a fourth day over the issue. Zach Cohen covers Congress for Bloomberg Industry Group.
Employees across the federal government, at least at DHS today, are coming into work either not with the promise of pay or to pick up their stuff and go home. This is obviously the first working day since the funding lapse over the weekend for the Department of Homeland Security, which covers not just ICE and Border Patrol agents that are at the center of this ongoing feud between Democrats and Republicans over policing practices of immigration enforcement, but also TSA, FEMA, cybersecurity, the Coast Guard are all facing this shutdown.
Bloomberg Industry Group's Zach Cohen says this DHS shutdown is likely to last several more days, if not weeks. Both houses of Congress are out of town all week for the President's Day holiday. Warner Brothers Discovery will reopen negotiations with Paramount Skydance after Paramount proposed raising its bid and sweetening other terms of its offer. Netflix, which is considered Warner Brothers' preferred bidder, has granted the board 7 days to consider Paramount's proposal, which includes raising its bid to at least $31 a share, $1 higher than its previous offer. Warner Brothers said the board still unanimously recommends shareholders vote in favor of its binding agreement to sell its namesake studios and HBO Max streaming business to Netflix for $27.75 a share, or $72 billion total. Pharma giant Bayer is preparing to announce a $10.5 billion settlement push to resolve current and future cancer lawsuits over its Roundup weed killer. The German company will propose paying $7.5 billion in a class action settlement, as well as $3 billion to settle existing U.S. cases. Roundup litigation has plagued Bayer since buying Monsanto for $66 billion. The company, though, still faces around 67,000 claims from plaintiffs who allege that long-term exposure to Roundup caused their cancer. Ford Motor is gearing up for next year's debut of a budget-priced electric vehicle line to contend with China with a starting price of $30,000, about $20,000 cheaper than the average new car in the U.S. Ford has engineered its next-generation EV to be lighter, sleeker, and more electrically efficient, with a driving range extended by around 50 miles. Ford is making the move despite taking $19.5 billion in charges tied to a sweeping overhaul of its EV business after struggling for years to make it profitable. We check the markets all day long here at Bloomberg. The Dow is essentially flat. The S&P 500 is up around 0.1%, while the Nasdaq is down around 0.25%. The yield on the 10-year is currently at 4.049, the 2-year at 3.43. Gold futures have dropped now below $4,900 an ounce amid weaker Asian demand after surging above $5,000 on Friday. Bitcoin trading at just over $67,000. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Dan Schwartzman, and this is Bloomberg.